If you think your silence is what hurts her the most, you may be misunderstanding the real power you hold. There is something far more unsettling than disappearing. And if you stay with me, you'll understand why this shift changes everything, not just for her, but for you. If this speaks to you at any point, quietly like the video and subscribe. Not for me, but for the version of you that's ready to grow beyond reaction. I'm Mary Smith, and this is Mindful Senior Living, where we don't just talk about relationships, we explore the deeper emotional patterns that shape how we love, how we detach, and how we return to ourselves with clarity and dignity. And I want to speak to you directly for a moment, because if you're here, something inside you is still processing. Maybe you've tried silence. Maybe you've pulled away, stopped texting, stopped checking in, hoping that space would create clarity, or maybe even bring her back. And yet, even in that silence, something in you still feels connected, still waiting, still quietly watching. That feeling, that internal tension, is exactly where most men misunderstand their own power. Most men are taught that no contact is the ultimate move. You pull back, you vanish. You stop texting, stop calling, stop watching her stories. And yes, silence creates space. Space creates curiosity. Curiosity can create longing, but silence by itself is still a reaction. It is often fueled by pain, by hope, by the unspoken desire that she will notice your absence and feel something sharp enough to come running back. And here is the uncomfortable truth. When your silence is emotionally charged, when it's waiting to be noticed, it still ties you to her. Even if she doesn't respond, you are internally watching, measuring, wondering. Your nervous system is still connected to the outcome. Let me share something I've seen over and over again, both in research and in real-life conversations with men who believed they were moving on, but internally were still deeply attached. There was a man in his early 50s who told me he hadn't spoken to a woman he cared about in over 3 months. On the surface, he was doing everything right. He had stopped reaching out. He wasn't engaging. But when I asked him a simple question, "How often do you think about whether she'll come back?" He paused. Then he said, "Every day." That's not detachment, that's silent attachment. And this is where the shift begins. Stoicism was never about silence as a strategy. Stoicism is about emotional sovereignty. There is a difference between "I am not speaking to you" and "I no longer need to move in response to you." One is tactical, the other is transformational. When a man goes silent but remains emotionally reactive, a woman often senses it. Not because she's calculating, but because human beings are wired to detect emotional energy. If your silence feels heavy, resentful, or performative, it carries tension, and tension invites a power struggle. It creates an invisible thread that still connects the two of you. But when a man becomes emotionally neutral, not cold, not cruel, not distant in a dramatic way, but grounded, centered, self-directed, something far deeper happens. You are no longer withdrawing to provoke. You are recalibrating because you genuinely value your peace. And I want you to think about that word for a moment. Peace. Not distraction, not avoidance, not pretending you don't care. Real peace. The kind where your thoughts are no longer orbiting around her decisions. The kind where your emotional state is no longer dependent on whether she reaches out or stays silent. Because that is what unsettles someone. Not your absence, but your emotional independence. There was another story I remember clearly. A client once described how, after weeks of trying to win back a woman's attention through silence, something shifted. He stopped checking her social media, not as a rule, but because he genuinely lost the urge. He stopped imagining what she might think about him. He started focusing on his work again, his health, his friendships. And one day, without planning it, he realized he hadn't thought about her all day. That moment, that quiet realization, is where transformation begins. Because when your identity is no longer orbiting the relationship, she can no longer predict you. She can no longer feel your emotional pull trying to reach her. And uncertainty, when it is calm and dignified, is far more powerful than silence fueled by pain. Many men think strength is in withholding communication. True strength is in withholding emotional dependence. When you stop monitoring her behavior, when you stop crafting your actions to influence her reaction, when your life begins to expand beyond the storyline of us, you are no longer playing the game. You are walking away from the board. And here's a simple exercise I often recommend. For the next 7 days, instead of asking yourself, will she notice my absence? Ask yourself, where is my attention going right now? And gently bring it back to something that builds you, your body, your work, your environment, your future. This is not about distraction, it's about redirection. Because most men misunderstand what actually creates emotional impact. They believe pain creates it. They believe distance creates it. They believe mystery creates it. But what truly creates emotional weight is emotional self-containment. When you practice no contact as a rule, you are still orienting your behavior around her. You are thinking about the timeline, counting the days, wondering when she'll reach out. That internal struggle is not stoicism. It is suppressed attachment. Real stoicism is quieter than that. It doesn't feel like a performance. It feels like returning home to yourself. And when a man stops reacting internally, not just externally, something shifts in the emotional field between two people. There is no more invisible tug, no more energetic checking, no more subtle attempt to win. And here is what many women experience in that moment, though they may never articulate it clearly. They feel the absence of emotional access, not the absence of conversation, the absence of access. When you were emotionally invested, even in silence, she could still feel you oriented toward her. That orientation creates comfort. Even if she pulls away, she subconsciously knows your emotional door is open. But when you close that door peacefully, without slamming it, without announcing it, without trying to prove anything, she feels something different. She feels that you are no longer waiting. And that realization often lands heavier than silence ever could. Because silence can mean, I'm hurt. Emotional self-containment means, I have moved forward. That distinction changes the emotional equation entirely. You see, human beings are deeply attuned to relevance. When someone we once had emotional influence over begins to operate independently without resentment, without hostility, it creates a kind of internal question. What changed? Why does he seem steady? Why doesn't he feel reachable anymore? And I want to be very clear about something here. This is not about manipulation. This is about emotional maturity. When you become emotionally anchored within yourself, you stop chasing reassurance. You stop interpreting her behavior as a reflection of your worth. You stop needing clarity from someone who is uncertain. And uncertainty no longer disturbs your peace. That calm, grounded stability is unfamiliar to many people because so many relationships operate on emotional reactivity. Text response, withdrawal, jealousy, pursuit, silence, reconnection, a loop. And when you step out of that loop entirely, it disrupts the rhythm she was used to. And disruption without drama is deeply unsettling, not because it hurts her ego, but because it signals growth. And growth, especially when it's quiet and undeniable, forces people to confront what they may have taken for granted. The man who needed validation is predictable. The man who no longer seeks it is powerful. Not loud, not aggressive, just internally free. And freedom is something silence alone can never communicate. There is something even deeper happening beneath all of this. When you move from silence to true emotional independence, you stop trying to be understood by someone who is no longer aligned with you. That is a profound shift. Because many men don't realize how much energy they spend trying to be seen correctly, replaying conversations, hoping she understands your intentions, wanting her to recognize your effort. Even during no contact, part of you quietly wants her to get it. But the moment you release the need to be understood by her, you reclaim an enormous amount of psychological power. Because now your actions are not driven by the desire for recognition. They are driven by alignment. And alignment is calm. And calm is where everything begins to change. When you begin making decisions that support your long-term peace, rather than short-term emotional relief, everything about your life shifts. You stop crafting subtle social media posts designed to send a message. You stop imagining what she might think if she saw you thriving. You stop performing growth, you simply grow, and that is where Stoicism becomes transformative rather than strategic. A Stoic man is not emotionally numb. He feels disappointment, attachment, nostalgia, even longing. But he does not allow these feelings to dictate his direction. He does not let them compromise his internal balance. Think about the last time you felt reactive in a relationship. Maybe she said something that triggered you, or maybe her absence stirred anxiety in you. When you operate from true emotional independence, those triggers no longer control you. You acknowledge them, you process them, but you don't let them become your story. You remain grounded, centered, and internally free. And when she senses that you are no longer trying to prove yourself, no longer seeking validation, no longer trying to be chosen, she feels the shift, not a hierarchy of dominance, but a hierarchy of self-respect. You are no longer placing her perception above your self-concept. And that can be disorienting for someone who once held emotional influence over you because attention is a form of energy. When you withdraw it without resentment, you are not punishing, you are reallocating. You are investing in your health, your purpose, your friendships, your routines, your future. Here is something powerful to consider. When you stop idealizing her, not because she is suddenly flawed, but because you begin seeing yourself more clearly, the entire dynamic changes. Your life expands, your perspective expands, and the emotional intensity that once felt overwhelming starts to feel like a chapter rather than the entire story. You start responding instead of reacting. If she reaches out, you respond calmly. If she doesn't, you remain steady. If she moves on, you do not spiral. If she hesitates, you do not chase. You are not detached from humanity. You are detached from dependency. And dependency is what fuels most relationship anxiety. The quiet truth is this: what often hurts more than silence is witnessing someone you once influenced become unaffected. Not cold, not bitter, unaffected. Because when you are unaffected, you are no longer negotiating for love. You are only accepting what aligns with your standards, and standards built from self-respect are far more powerful than any tactic designed to trigger a reaction. There is a moment that happens quietly inside a man when he truly understands this. It's the moment he stops asking, "How do I make her feel something?" and starts asking, "Why was I willing to feel so little for myself?" That question changes everything. Because when you obsess over strategies, no contact, delayed replies, controlled indifference, you are still centering her emotions as the reference point. You are still measuring your worth against her reactions. But Stoicism asks a different question. It asks, what is within my control? Her feelings are not. Her timing is not. Her clarity is not. Your character is. Your standards are. Your response is. And when you deeply internalize that, your behavior shifts in ways that are subtle but undeniable. You stop over-explaining yourself. You stop defending your value. You stop negotiating for consistency. Instead, you observe. You watch how someone treats you without trying to manage the outcome. You listen to their patterns instead of their promises. You pay attention to how you feel around them, calm or anxious, respected or uncertain. This awareness is not coldness. It is emotional maturity. When you no longer attempt to control the narrative, you become deeply grounded. And grounded men are rare. Not because men are incapable of emotional intelligence, but because many were never taught that strength can be quiet. They were taught to pursue, to fix, to prove, to endure. Very few were taught to step back and evaluate whether the connection is truly reciprocal. When you do that, when you calmly decide that your time, energy, and attention are sacred, you communicate something without saying a word. You communicate that access to you is earned through consistency, not chemistry alone. And that realization can land heavily because chemistry is easy. Consistency requires character. If she senses that you are no longer impressed by temporary affection, no longer swayed by intermittent attention, no longer activated by mixed signals, she understands that you are operating from a higher internal standard. And standards do not beg. They attract alignment, or they walk away peacefully. That peaceful detachment is what unsettles more than silence ever could. Silence can feel like a tactic. Standards feel like permanence. When a woman realizes that you are not waiting for her to change, that you are simply continuing forward, she is forced to confront her own clarity, not because you demanded it, but because your stability highlights it. And here is the part most men don't expect. This shift isn't primarily about her reaction, it's about your nervous system. When you stop chasing emotional closure, your body relaxes, your sleep improves, your thoughts slow down, your focus returns, and you reclaim mental space that was once consumed by what if. That internal calm is the real reward. And ironically, that calm is what creates the deepest psychological impact externally. Because calm men cannot be emotionally leveraged, they cannot be baited, they cannot be destabilized by inconsistency. And when someone realizes they no longer have the power to disrupt you, they feel it deeply. And here's the truth most men only understand much later. The goal was never to make her miss you. The goal was to become the man who no longer abandons himself. When you first consider no contact, it often comes from a place of survival. You need space because the connection feels overwhelming. You need silence because interaction feels painful. That is human. That is understandable. But growth begins when silence stops being a shield and starts becoming clarity. Clarity about what you tolerate, clarity about what you deserve, clarity about the kind of partnership you are actually built for. When you internalize Stoicism, not as emotional suppression, but as emotional responsibility, you stop outsourcing your peace. You no longer wait for someone to choose you in order to feel valuable. You no longer interpret distance as a verdict on your worth. You no longer scramble to restore connection at the cost of your dignity. And something powerful happens in that space. You begin to choose yourself in small, consistent ways. You go to the gym even when motivation dips. You focus on your work even when nostalgia creeps in. You reconnect with friends instead of isolating. You pursue interests that have nothing to do with impressing anyone. This is not about becoming unbothered. It's about becoming internally anchored. And when a man becomes anchored, he becomes difficult to shake. Not because he is rigid, but because he is rooted. If she reappears, you assess calmly rather than react emotionally. If she apologizes, you listen, but you evaluate patterns, not just words. If she remains distant, you do not shrink yourself to maintain proximity. You understand that love is not proven through longing, it is proven through consistency. And consistency cannot be forced. When you reach this stage, something subtle but profound shifts in your presence. You walk differently. You speak more deliberately. You laugh without checking who is watching. You no longer scan rooms for validation. You are not trying to be mysterious. You are simply self-contained, and self-contained men create a different kind of attraction. Not the anxious, dramatic pull of uncertainty, but the steady draw of stability. But here's the deeper revelation. Even if she never comes back, even if she never realizes your value, even if the story ends quietly, you win, because you did not allow heartbreak to turn you bitter. You allowed it to turn you disciplined. You did not let rejection collapse your identity. You used it to refine it. That is the Stoic path. Not revenge, not emotional shutdown, but refinement. And when a man refines himself instead of reacting to loss, he doesn't just become more attractive, he becomes free. Free from chasing, free from proving, free from needing closure from someone who could not offer clarity. And freedom, calm, grounded, self-directed freedom, will always carry more weight than silence. There is a crucial point most men overlook. Emotional freedom is not about becoming aloof or cold. It's about reorienting your energy toward what matters, your growth, your goals, your life. Let me share a story from my own work. A client in his late 50s was devastated after a long-term relationship ended. At first, he followed all the rules of no contact. He stopped messaging, stopped checking social media. But internally, he was obsessed with her reaction. Every thought, every move was measured against her behavior. We worked together to shift his focus inward. Slowly, over weeks, he stopped monitoring her. He started investing in his health, revisiting old hobbies, reconnecting with friends, and he noticed something extraordinary. He was no longer preoccupied with her approval. He felt a calmness he hadn't experienced in years, and interestingly, that calm made him more attractive. Not because he was performing, but because he was aligned with himself. That internal alignment is magnetic. The essence of this shift is subtle but powerful. When you stop trying to be understood by someone who is no longer aligned with you, you reclaim your mental and emotional bandwidth. You stop replaying conversations in your mind, wishing she understood your intentions, hoping she recognizes your effort. Even during no contact, part of you quietly wants her to get it, to see what she lost, to realize your value. But the moment you release the need to be understood by her, you reclaim enormous psychological power. Your actions are no longer driven by the desire for recognition. They are driven by alignment. And alignment is calm, intentional, and unwavering. Now, think about how this plays out in everyday life. You stop overanalyzing her behavior. You stop crafting subtle social media posts to send messages. You stop imagining what she might think if she saw you thriving. You simply grow. You live in alignment with your values, your purpose, your standards. And that is where true Stoicism emerges, not as a tactic to influence others, but as a lifestyle that reflects emotional mastery. You are not emotionally numb. You feel disappointment, attachment, nostalgia, and longing, but these emotions no longer dictate your actions. They inform you without controlling you. This is the difference between reactive detachment and transformational self-containment. When you are truly anchored, you are difficult to destabilize. When someone who once held emotional influence over you realizes you are no longer reachable in the old way, they feel a subtle disorientation. It's not manipulation. It's a natural consequence of your emotional maturity. Your calm, grounded presence communicates far more than any words, any tactic, or any silence could. And that is the psychological truth. Humans respond to energy far more than strategy. Many men believe that withholding communication or creating mystery is the key to influence. They think that if they disappear just enough, if they pull back strategically, they can create longing. But the real source of emotional impact is not absence, it is presence. Your presence within yourself. Emotional self-containment generates curiosity, respect, and attraction in ways that tactical silence never can. When you are internally free, externally detached, your interactions are no longer about managing outcomes. They are about authenticity, alignment, and peace. Let me give you a practical exercise for cultivating this. For the next week, notice every time you feel the urge to check her social media, replay a conversation, or wonder about her perception of you. Instead of acting on that impulse, redirect your attention to an area of your life that builds you, your health, your work, a hobby, or a connection with a friend. When you notice your thoughts drifting back to her, gently guide them to something that grounds and nourishes you. Over time, this practice shifts your nervous system, cultivates true emotional independence, and helps you operate from a calm, centered place. And here is something most men don't anticipate. When you achieve this level of internal stability, it's profoundly unsettling to the other person, not because you are trying to hurt them, but because they realize the old dynamic no longer exists. You are no longer orbiting around them. You are no longer influenced by their reactions. You are no longer negotiating for validation. You are free. That freedom communicates power in the quietest, most potent way. Take this path, not for her, but for the man you are becoming. And this is where the transformation becomes truly profound. You no longer idealize the other person, not because you see them as flawed, but because you begin to see yourself more clearly. Your life expands, your perspective expands, and the emotional intensity that once consumed you now becomes a chapter rather than the entire story. You respond calmly if she reaches out. You stay steady if she doesn't. You do not spiral if she moves on. You do not chase if she hesitates. You are not detached from humanity. You are detached from dependency. And dependency is what fuels most relationship anxiety. Think about this for a moment. When you are truly emotionally independent, you no longer negotiate your self-worth based on someone else's behavior. You no longer replay conversations in your mind, hoping she understood your intentions. You stop wishing she recognized your effort. Even in silence, part of you used to crave acknowledgement, the validation that she gets it. The moment you release that need, you reclaim immense psychological power. Your actions are no longer driven by the desire for recognition. They are driven by alignment with yourself. Alignment is calm. Alignment is quiet. Alignment is undeniable. This isn't about becoming cold or detached. It's about becoming internally anchored. You make choices that support your long-term peace. You stop performing growth to be seen. You simply grow. You invest in your health, your routines, your friends, your passions. You pursue things that have nothing to do with impressing anyone. And as you expand your own life, your presence naturally shifts. You walk with a grounded confidence. You speak deliberately. You laugh freely without scanning the room for approval. You no longer search for validation. You are self-contained, and self-contained men create a different kind of attraction. Not the anxious pull of drama, but the steady draw of stability. And stability is magnetic because it is rare. Even if she never comes back, even if she never realizes your value, even if the story ends quietly, you have won. You have not allowed heartbreak to turn you bitter. You allowed it to refine you. You did not let rejection collapse your identity. You used it to strengthen your sense of self. This is the Stoic path. Refinement, not revenge. Clarity, not emotional shutdown. Freedom, not dependence. And when you achieve this, you become difficult to shake, not rigid, but rooted. If she reappears, you assess calmly rather than reacting. If she apologizes, you evaluate patterns, not just words. If she remains distant, you do not compromise your peace to maintain proximity. You understand that love is proven through consistency, not longing, and consistency cannot be forced. Now, consider the deeper psychological impact. Humans are wired to respond to energy far more than to words or tactics. Silence may create curiosity, but emotional self-containment creates respect, intrigue, and attraction that is far more lasting. The energy you project, calm, centered, aligned, is magnetic. It communicates power without manipulation. It signals that you are emotionally sovereign, that your peace is non-negotiable, that your life expands beyond any one relationship. And that message is received subconsciously. The realization that you are no longer emotionally available in the old way is unsettling. Not because you intend it, but because it reflects transformation. Practical exercises help reinforce this. Each day, notice when your thoughts drift toward her behavior, toward what-if scenarios, or toward attempts to influence outcomes. Instead of acting on these impulses, redirect your energy toward something that grounds and builds you. A workout, a project, a hobby, a meaningful conversation, or reconnecting with a friend. When you practice this consistently, your nervous system stabilizes. You cultivate internal freedom. You stop centering your life on reactions and start centering it on alignment, growth, and purpose. This shift is subtle but unmistakable in the way you carry yourself, the calm in your voice, the steadiness in your presence. And the final truth, this journey is not about her. It is about you. It is about reclaiming your energy, your attention, your life. It is about choosing yourself consistently, intentionally, without drama. When you embody this, you demonstrate a higher form of strength. Quiet, grounded, emotionally disciplined strength. You are no longer reactive, no longer dependent, no longer negotiating for validation. You are free, free from chasing, free from proving, free from needing closure from someone who cannot offer clarity. And that freedom, that calm, self-directed, aligned presence carries far more weight than silence ever could. It is the power of emotional independence, the magnetism of self-respect, and the quiet authority of a man who knows his worth and refuses to compromise it. This is where true transformation lies, not in tactics, not in withdrawal, not in games, but in inner mastery. When you cultivate this, your relationships shift, your peace deepens, your confidence grows, your life becomes richer, more expansive, and profoundly fulfilling. And even if the story ends quietly, you have won because you have not lost yourself. You have chosen clarity over chaos, growth over reaction, and freedom over dependency. And that, my friends, is the ultimate power.